Welcome back to the Fearless Females Voice podcast. On this episode, I am joined by my good friend Kati Gastrow. Kati and I met a few years ago when we were both working within the engineering team of our previous company. Kati made such a big impact with her work and leadership style, and I learned a lot from her. I would go to her for career advice and general life advice as I admired her courage and successes at work. Kati was born and raised in South Africa, where she studied engineering and had been working within this sector since graduating. She has built an incredible career within engineering and now holds a very senior leadership position with a top FMCG company. On this podcast, she talks us through her career moves, how to develop a 5 to 10 year career plan, her advice and tips on networking and building a network, and also her passion for everything engineering and how she turned this into a success. I really enjoyed speaking to her about her journey so far, and I hope you gain as much out of this as I did. Without further ado, let's get stuck in. So Kati, tell me, what does being a fearless female mean to you?
Well, it took me a long time to really understand what being a fearless female is. And I came across this great analogy in a book that I was reading, and it explained what caution is versus courage and how you need to find the right balance between the two. The main analogy was really if you need enough courage to go into the water to save someone from drowning, but enough caution not to drown yourself. And so you need to have courage. Courage is only true courage when you're not being reckless. And caution is only true caution when you're not being cowardly. So you need to find that balance. And I think that is what being fearless is all about, is this element of risk, appetite for risk, but not tending to recklessness, but then also not being too cozy in the comfort zone, and remaining there and then becoming too, laid back or not challenging yourself enough.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say is being a fearless female. Females go through a lot of changes throughout their life in any case, but you have to practice. You have to practice being fearless.
Oh, wow. I love that. Getting out of your comfort zone, growing, not doing it in a reckless way. I love it. Couldn't agree more. So I've had the pleasure of working with you, Kati. We've worked together for probably a few years in our previous company. And I can honestly say I've learned so much from you. You've been a great mentor to me, and I'm sure you have been to others as well. And I just admire everything you've achieved in your career. So I wanted to know, tell me more about how your career journey began.
So it began, I was quite lucky to go to a high school that I really loved. And we had an education system that balanced your talents. So you weren't forced at an early age, say 14, to choose one path. I was able to take French and German and history alongside science and maths, and chemistry. And that gave me quite a good rounded idea of what do I like, what am I good at. So when it came to choosing a path for university, I tended towards what I was naturally good at, which was languages, which was translation. And I started off in a Bachelor of Arts and studying media and communication and translation studies. Now, I did not actually know what engineering was when I was at university. I actually I met an old school friend on campus, and he was studying engineering, and I was like, what are you talking about? And so he took me with him to a maths lecture, and I was like, oh, is this engineering? I'd remembered maths from high school and thought, okay, well, this is maths. I can do maths. And then only during that, I used my first year of Bachelor Arts to actually understand what engineering is by sitting in on lectures, by reading up about it, and most importantly was really when I was doing holiday vacation work at an electronics company, translating parts lists from English to German. And I was going through these words, and they were evidently German, and I knew no German. but I had no idea what these were. I couldn't picture them in my mind. I had no idea what they were used for. And when I did very, very literal translations, my project manager came to me and he said, well, I can see from this that you've never come across this before. So come downstairs and let me show you. And they showed me. They were busy building submarines for armies, or the Navy at that time, the South African Navy. And I was just, it didn't look anything like a submarine. It was the insides of a control system of a submarine. And I thought, oh, okay, so this is what a version of engineering is. So I had a couple of those episodes during my first year of engineering, and then by first year of Bachelor of Arts, and then by the end of it, I changed my degree to Bachelor of Engineering. But in order to do that, I needed to have an interview with the Dean of Engineering. And he'd be like, it's very rare to do it this way around. Usually people flee from engineering to the arts. And now here you are trying to go the other way. Why? What brings you to it? And then I said, well, I want to do both. I want to do both. I want to be able to keep my art side, the language side, and do engineering. He's like, no, you have to choose. So he says, no one's ever done it at the same time. Okay, fine. In the end, I am so grateful for having done that, having made that decision. And it took me a long time to make that decision. I mean, it's not like something that I woke up with when I was 12 or 14. I had to wait until I was at university to think, well, what else can I do? And what really drove me was I was embarrassed that I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, oh my word, this is a whole gap in my education. How can I pay money to university and not fill the gap in my education? So I think that is one way of looking at why I gravitated towards engineering.
And did you look at other options as well? So you mentioned that your friend took you to these maths lectures, but did you ever think, oh, well, I could do medicine with this as well, or something other than engineering, or were you quite kind of focused in on engineering?
You're right. I mean, I could have, with my marks, I could have done whatever I wanted. And I did look at law at one stage as well. And that would be more, again, the language route, the arguing route, the debating route. And then medicine, there were some really great role models in my family who've gone that path as well. But for me, it was the immersiveness of it, I think. Sometimes you really do get a buzz from doing maths, doing physics, cracking a really complex question or problem. And it takes perseverance, it takes persistence, and you have to sometimes drop it and come back later and say, oh, I'm going to solve this problem. And I think that's the part that was what I'd been practicing throughout several, other things in my life. So I think that's what led me then to engineering.
Nice. And there are many different types of engineering. So I studied chemical engineering, and I was in a bit of a similar position. So when I did my A levels back in college, I picked on what my strengths were and what I was interested in, and that led me down the path of chemical engineering. But there are many different types of engineering, and I guess the question is, how did you distinguish between each one and choose the one that you've gone for, which is, I guess, controls automation?
That's a good question.
So why controls and automation? I think while I was researching, making this step from going from Bachelor of Arts to engineering, I visited the civil engineers, and I saw that they were playing with sand and mud. And I visited the mechanical engineers, and I saw that they were playing with gearboxes and changing oil. And then I saw the chemical engineers were making hydrogen sulfide. And what the electrical and electronic engineers are the cleanest. So let me try that for the time being, because that was the least dirty and smelly.
I can probably agree to that one as well. So fair enough. And you mentioned that you'd studied in South Africa. So what was it like back there? So when I studied here, there was a real small ratio of women to the guys on the course. So is it quite similar in South Africa?
Yeah, definitely. We were probably about 11 out of, in first year we were about 400 students, and
wow, big class.
About 11, between 11 and 15 women. And by the time we got to fourth year, we were probably just 8. In chemical engineering, the ratios were much better. Chemical engineering is definitely the one that attracts women because it's so closely related to cooking. I mean, it's you know, it's related to the chemicals that or the chemistry that you can do in your kitchen. But in electronic engineering, for sure, at the end of it, we were probably only about 8 doing electronic engineering, and then there were probably about like 20 women doing chemical engineering.
So how did you find your experience at university studying this new degree?
Was tough. It was, you really needed to have a good study group, a group of friends to go through this together, and to have the support, the moral support just to keep going. Because sometimes you just hit a wall where you're thinking, oh, am I not good enough? How can I not be getting this? And the volume of work is significant, it's huge. And the concepts are sometimes really abstract, and you really have to think about what it is you're actually learning, because you have to apply it. Engineering is all about applying physics and applying rules of motion and laws of electronics to real world problems. And without you really getting a grasp of this technology as your tool, it's quite hard to get your head around sometimes. It's these peaks and troughs of mood and of success, and even one time you'd be able to get a really great mark, really cracking a problem and solving it, and then almost within a couple of weeks you find yourself, okay, whatever happened those months ago is nothing compared to what's happening now. You have to the fundamentals, you have to just keep on polishing your knowledge, and I think it's not completely out of reach. I think that it's that perseverance that it helps train, and also the confidence that it helps train. That if you see yourself hitting a wall, you go back to say, okay, well, what do I know? And it's the mental resilience that you learn of how to talk your way out, talk yourself out of this hole, and you learn how to motivate yourself again. Because in the end, it's your battle, it's your knowledge that you're trying to fill, it's your career that you're trying to build, and it's your curiosity that you're following. Yes, you will have most likely you'll have a great group of friends, which it's not about the size of the group really, it's about this shared experience. And whether it's 4 or 5 or 10 or 12, the group work is really a great way to just let off steam as well, and just find out who's good at what. Because when it comes to engineering in the real world, we tend to have this Silicon Valley image of the super engineer. This is the unicorn. This is the code boy who's sitting there on his own and then comes up with this complete breakthrough. And that notion is a very masculine, very Western notion of what it takes to solve a problem and what it takes to even understand a problem. And what you learn in the modern way of teaching engineering is it's about multidiscipline skills. It's about coming at a problem with a diverse perspective of a new way of interpreting something, but also of solving things in not necessarily a new way. The problems are not necessarily newer, but they are more evolved and more complex. And the modern way of learning engineering is all about being able to cooperate as a team and bringing your technical knowledge to the social group. And as a social group, you produce the best possible outcome. So that element is really, really exciting for me. And it's called techno-social team, because the outcome of that team is as good as your technical skills, but also as your social skills. If you have team members that are going off on their own tangent and not involving the group, or hoarding knowledge or resources, or not answering questions, or not bringing the pool of knowledge, you can almost see it as you're sitting around a fireplace and everyone has to chuck in their bit to make this fire burn. And if you have team members that are sitting too far away from the fire, not chucking in their bit, you will not come up with the best possible solution. So it's really that balance between technology, social skills, that makes engineering work.
Yeah, I think that's really nicely said. I love the analogy about throwing things in the fire as well. It's I can say I've had my own fair share of experiences in that as well. And as you know, in the team that we used to work in, it's very much that as well. There's a lot of teamwork, and I agree with the social skills, because many people even ask me now, what do you do? What is engineering? And they just assume that I'm either on my laptop coding, and I'm just there like, I know nothing about coding. That's not the type of engineering I'm doing. So there is that kind of stereotype and perception of what engineering is, but it's almost to say, well, there's many different routes, many different paths. And yeah, I agree. It's all about teamwork as well. Sounds like you've learned many, many skills through your degree, and then you've moved forward in your career and you've had a really successful career in engineering. So can you talk us through how that started? So moving or transitioning from your university experience through to your first job.
So there's a really great way of getting graduates into industry through bursary schemes in South Africa. So large companies, they usually offer bursaries to fund the last 2 years of your university. And through that, you then also get into their scheme to become their graduate in their graduate development program. So I was lucky enough to get onto such scheme with a company called Sasol, which does coal to liquid processing. So a huge petrochemical plant just outside of Johannesburg. And I think what really helped is just to contrast the real world experience with the theoretical experience that you get at university, especially when it comes to control and automation. People think, okay, control and automation, it's highly, highly theoretical and it's very, very technical. Yes, it is. But actually, when applied to real world processes, it's super logical and systems orientated. And you find yourself working in these control loops that you apply to so many different industries and so many different scenarios, where you have a target, try and meet that target. What does it take to meet the target? You find out if you need to add more, or if you need to add less, or if you need to go faster, or if you need to go slower. And those schemes, those control schemes, we have as humans intrinsically. So I think people shy away from control and automation, whereas it's so much more intuitive than people think. So after I was working for that company for probably a couple of years, 3 to 4 years, I was looking to do a bit more international work. And I joined, I had a webinar, which was really great, which explained that you can have an international career on many different levels. You can have an international career in the same country that you're in by having international team members as part of your team.
Okay.
By working in a company in your country that is not necessarily native to your country. So that has a headquarters in a different country. That already gives you a touch, a taste of international perspectives without you needing to move country. And then the obvious one, when people think international career, is move country.
Yes.
So I ended up moving country. I moved from South Africa to Germany. I was very lucky to join this very great company doing perfumes and shampoos, and a completely different industry to what I was in. And it was a challenge, but one foot in the known and one foot in the unknown. So I had a foot in the known of what my technical skills were, what my social skills were, what my leadership skills were, and then my unknown was going into a completely different industry and completely different country.
Which country did you move to?
Germany.
And what was that like? How did you make that decision of not only moving to a different industry, but also another country? That's scary.
So there are some great schemes or enablers for you to find the right opportunities abroad. There was a company that was called Careers International that hosted a careers event, a recruitment event at that time in Brussels. And what this event was multiple companies recruiting at the same fair and doing the interviews at the same location during the same 2 days. So I applied to participate at the fair. You had to be invited to attend the fair as a potential candidate, and then you would have multiple interviews with multiple companies at that event, and then to see whether any follow-ups would come from that. So there are similar organizations available or that look to attract international talent to the likes of, say, Canada or the Middle East or into Europe, especially when it comes to engineering talent, because there is a shortage of people that have got sustained career in engineering and have the relevant experience that other countries are looking for. So for me, what I wanted to get out of the move was moving from primary industry to a secondary industry. So South Africa is very known for mining, for raw materials, for farming, but not such a strong reputation for manufacturing. A lot of products tend to still be imported into Africa, although there is a huge, there are a lot of companies that do still have manufacturing bases in Africa. There's a large proportion of products that are imported. So I was looking forward to Europe to say, well, let's see what manufacturing is like, especially because you're using completely different technologies, different tool sets for troubleshooting, for problem solving, and you make different products in the end. So it was, that was part of my goal. It wasn't as intentional, I think, as I can tell now in hindsight. I think it was more about, well, let's go and let's see what comes up. And I did have interviews with, car manufacturer, and then a management consulting company, and then a light bulb manufacturer. And so in the end, the one that was probably the most accessible and the most interesting for me was fast-moving consumer goods.
Okay, so what was your time like there then when you did your move?
So moving into a new company is always, you have to embed yourself and you have to adapt. It's almost like an organ transplant. If you don't assimilate, you may be just rejected. And after a period of time, people will be like, yeah, it's not working. It may work and may not work. But there's a really good book that I didn't read at the time. I only read it much later to say, oh, well, I'm glad I did that right. So the book is called The First 90 Days. And
I've heard of this one.
It has some really logical way of assessing, well, how big is the change that you're making? And how big is this career transition? Are you changing industries? Are you going to a role that is newly created? Are you within the same company changing roles and now leading your peers? Are you doing two jobs at the same time? And there's a really great way to assess, well, how big is going to be the transition and then the associated transition stress, because people underestimate the comparison that you keep on running in your mind of, "Oh, that's not how I used to do it." And you're just conflicted with your past experience and with your current experience, and you need to resolve that internally. So, okay, well, this is interesting, and it's that technique. And how do you resolve that conflict? Do you force your way of doing things on this new environment, or do you take your time in assessing, okay, taking it in before making an assessment? Because it's really is culture dependent. You're really walking into a completely new culture when you're walking into a new company, when it comes to how decisions are made, how influence is transferred, who trusts who, if it's a process-driven company or whether it's a authority-driven company where, you know, a person's ideas, you know, the more senior the person, their ideas go no matter what. If it's consensus-based, where everyone gets a view in and potentially decisions take longer to take because everyone gets to have their view. It really is different company to company and even role to role. So I was lucky that I was in a fairly junior role when I joined, so I had a lot of support that I could, you know, ask for from my senior leaders in terms of the right guidance. But I think as you go and do career changes later on in life into more senior roles, this is something that you just need to be aware of trying to bring the old baggage that you've had before into the new environment without really assessing the area first.
I agree. So I know you've done a few career changes. So from that, what other advice would you give to anyone looking to do a career change?
I would say reach out to mentors and reach out to people whose role you think you want, and to really just double check your assumptions on what it means to do a certain role or what it takes to do a certain role. And I think one great thing is organizations such as the Women Engineering Society, which hosts a whole range of mentors in different segments, different industry segments, different roles, different seniorities. And you can reach out to them, and they can offer you advice. And the thing is, with mentorship, people tend to think, oh, this is a long-term relationship. It doesn't need to be. If you see someone whose job title you think you want, reach out to them and have a conversation. Say, you know, maybe you'd want to have another conversation, but maybe it is just the one conversation that you need, the depth of conversation that you need to see, all right, this validates my assumptions, or this has uncovered something that I didn't expect, and you need to research a bit more. But in the end, you won't know what it takes until you're really in the situation. And that's why, again, it's this fearlessness, it's this caution versus courage. If you've got one foot in the camp where you're certain you know what you can do, you've got a list of achievements behind you, you've got a list of where you've proven to yourself what you can do, and then your other foot is in the stretch, in the unknown, where you're challenging yourself. Find a role that allows you to do both, where you have some nice projects to do or some nice parts of your role that you know you can ace, and the other ones that you say, all right, I haven't done this before, but I can refuel with my successes and go ahead with the challenges in the parts that I don't know and challenge myself. Because I think that's the balance between caution and courage.
I think that's how that will allow you to get further as well, because you're not then just in your comfort zone doing something that you know in and out. You need to, well, for me anyway, I always try and progress into roles which Exactly that. One foot in, one foot out. So there's elements which I have no clue about, which I then need to learn, adapt myself. And that's the next challenge for me. And that always allows me to feel good about what I'm doing and have more of an impact. So yeah, I agree with that. That's
Yeah, because you will definitely need, if you start hitting walls or start being confronted with, oh no, I didn't think that would happen, or oh, why is this not happening the way I want it to happen, to be able to talk your way out of these disappointments, you need a resource that gives you a successful feeling. And sometimes people, if they have a strong support structure outside of work, they refuel with the successes outside of work and therefore launch head on into an unknown role. But then again, it's just at a different scale, whether you have that pool that can fuel you, so that you can go into the pool that you can dip in and out of when the going gets tough.
Yeah, that's fair. And you mentioned that you moved from South Africa to Germany. And I know that then from the role which you were doing in Germany, you moved to the UK. Now, throughout my career, even especially when I started as a graduate in my first ever company, I was told that moving around internationally always helps grow your career at a quicker pace. This is something that's pretty much been drilled into me. And I'm slowly figuring things out for myself to see, is that right or is that wrong, and what the benefits really are? What are your thoughts? Is that a myth?
Moving countries is not without its challenges. And moving countries comes with a big give and take. You do lose touch with where you're leaving. And I had this great lyric the other day, which has said, don't forget where you came from, because where you came from won't forget you. And
I like that.
Really the key, that you need to be able to cope in the new country that you're in, especially if you're in a town where you don't know anyone, where you may not even speak the language, and you need to now be resourceful. So international expats tend to group together because
yes,
they know they're not at home. They know they're doing this challenge in their mind, comparing their current life to the life they left behind, or the life that they're seeing their friends who they've left behind start to lead and evolve. And you need to know when the timing is right for you. If you're at a particular stage in your life where you want to settle down, or you want to not be asked to move at the drop of a hat, then moving countries may be so disruptive that you just want to backtrack. And there's nothing wrong with backtracking. It is really a decision that needs to be, you need to weigh it up, and you need to tell your family about it, and you need to let them know, okay, what it means that you're living in a different country, what it means for how will you communicate, how will you keep in touch, how will you show each other that you still love each other. It adds a huge amount to your own resilience, to your own independence, to seeing that yes, you can do it on your own, and you don't maybe need such a huge support circle as what you did during your high school years or university years. And in the end, I think it will make you realize how similar people are, but also, that you can benefit from the best of both worlds, from the best of both countries that you're living in, from the best of both cultures that you're coming from. And I think it'll make you more tolerant. Living in a different country definitely makes you more tolerant, because you can see these, the good things and the bad things.
Nice. And that leads quite nicely into career planning, because you mentioned it depends, I guess, on what stage of life that you're in. Now, I've been thinking about career planning ever since I actually graduated as well. Again, I joined a grad scheme, and that's the first thing they talk about, right? What's your next 10-year plan? And we're just there as fresh graduates, like, we just want to party, we just want to have a bit of fun, do our job. And as you go on in your career, it becomes more and more important, because alongside your career is then the kind of commitments of life that kick in. So when you're 21, 22, you may not be thinking about, let's say, your life commitments. It's more just, I just want to continue having fun. And I used to go out last year in uni, let's continue that. Or that's where I was at anyway. And I remember speaking to you about it, and you had a really nice process of the next kind of 5 to 10 year plan and what my expectations were and what I would like to do when. And that really, really helped me. So I wanted to ask you if you could talk us through the career planning element and how you've done that for yourself.
Okay, so I learned this, which was already, I was already 6 years into my career. So I would have benefited from learning this a bit earlier. So basically, it's a very simple way of sketching out on a whiteboard, on a piece of paper, on Excel, every single year from today up for the next 10, 15 years, your age that you will be in every single one of those years, the age of your family and the people closest to you, so your siblings, your partner, your grandparents, and that'll just give you a perspective of, okay, age will progress, everyone's age will progress, and at different ages, different things happen. And visualizing that, and even making that into a heat map, when you see that a large portion of your family will be this age at that time, means, okay, well, your life needs will start changing. Either you will start wanting to plan a family, or you'll have to start being more present in the lives of your parents again. Being able to visualize that means, okay, your career will need to live in harmony with the rest of your life. Otherwise, you will always feel guilty, either by not being fully present for your family demands or fully present for your work demands. And then I think what's been really exciting in the last couple of years is this notion of portfolio careers, where you don't necessarily can guarantee that you have the same, same company, that you're working for the same company for your whole life. You'll have to anticipate that you're going to be moving through organizational changes or making the changes for yourself to look for new opportunities. And so by having a network that runs parallel to your main organization, for example, the professional networks such as the Institute of Engineering Technology, Women's Engineering Society, your church network, or your other social networks running parallel that are a bit more formal, that you can take and experience leadership roles in a volunteer network, such as running volunteer activities. You can progress in those networks as well, to being part of council members, to being in leadership positions, to eventually seeing yourself, as charity board members. That is what's part of this sort of portfolio career planning, that you can then coincide with. If you know that by the time you're 45, your parents will be 65 or 70, that you may not be able to have as much time working on a full-time job. If you're going to be thinking of part-timing that time, how would we supplement that income? Would you be doing leadership roles that are then on a part-time basis in different organizations? How would you build up the network that you need to get to that position, starting now, starting 7-8 years ahead of it, to build up to a potential endpoint? So visualizing timeline, we tend to visualize time in a linear way, but being able to visualize it and just anticipate life milestones, I think helps. I know it doesn't tell you exactly what role you'll need to do, but it just starts to morph. When are you mobile? When are you not so mobile?
Yeah, I get that. So that's more about the life milestone. So when it comes to what role you want to do, I found something that helps with what I'm looking for is kind of linking in my strengths, where I would like to progress in, where my weak areas are that I may want to work on from my next role. And you mentioned that element of networking and speaking to others. And I think that's so important, whether it's mentors and people you look up to in their careers, anyone who can kind of help guide you on that path. So that's really helped me with my career. And I was going to say, you're now in leadership role yourself, and you've been really successful in your career over the years that you've been working in engineering. So has this career tool helped you map that out? Have you always kind of aimed for these kind of positions, and how have you got to that?
I think sometimes things come to you which you didn't expect, that don't necessarily fit into the plan, and that's great, because I was, for this current role, for example, that I'm in now, I was approached by LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is just an amazing tool for really understanding the breadth and the depth of what people do with 8 hours of their day. This role I was recruited for, so I didn't really seek it out, but the reason that I chose it was because it went for an area that I know I had neglected or hadn't fully explored up to now. And it was, again, this great opportunity of having in one foot in what I know and one foot in what I don't yet know. But there's, in these kind of organizations, you need to keep an inner game and an outer game in mind. So an inner game plan is really understanding the organization you're currently in, understanding the roles, the strategies, the networks, the influences, and having an interest in the current organization that you're in. That's where it'll lead you to identifying people that can become your sponsors, that witness you and witness your behavior, witness your skills, and then can vouch for you in other forums. And at the same time, you shouldn't neglect an outer game, which means, all right, are your skills relevant for the rest of the industry? What are the things that you are, what are the knowledge gaps that you are ignoring, but that still exist that you could transfer into? And for that, I find being part of the Institute of Engineering Technology just keeps me aware of what it is that I don't know, so that if I had to formulate a plan to say, all right, I need to now pivot, I now need to do, an outside game plan, I now need to go back into the employment market and fight for my legitimacy and fight for my place in a new company, and be more offensive in looking for roles as opposed to being passive. You just need to keep abreast of what it is that you don't know, just to know that there's a choice that you're making, that it's not an unconscious choice. And it could be something that could still be interesting for you. So, for example, the area that I don't know much about is farming and vertical farming. And I'm keeping, on top of that, just reading articles and like, oh, okay, well, this is really interesting, because I see a real future for vertical farming, for local distribution of growing food locally as opposed to centrally, especially when we're seeing climate change issues happening that may impact food security in the future. So even though it has nothing to do with my immediate day-to-day role, I feel like it's something that is going to be emerging that I want to be ready for.
That's the one thing that I've realized as well. When we were working together as well, you always did so many kind of extracurricular activities outside of work, all of which involved engineering. And it just made me think, you're so engrossed in it, you love what you do, And it's really nice to see, because there's so many people who, I'm not just talking about in engineering, but in any role, that say, oh, we're not really happy in what we're doing. We want to try something different. This isn't really for us. So clearly the job satisfaction isn't there. But you've been in engineering for a long time now, and you've done a lot of work for the engineering community, let's say, outside of work. So it's almost like, how did you find that job satisfaction? How did you know this is it? This is your calling?
I think, I really get energized by seeing people have pride in their work, and by being in these extracurricular projects, I get to experience more of that, and that helps me become more proud of the work I do as well, because I can see where my work then fits into solving society's problems. I had the really great opportunity to attend a Thanksgiving service at Westminster Abbey, which was giving thanks to engineers. And this was
It's amazing.
This was in 2019 during the year of engineering, and the chaplain of Westminster Abbey opened up the sermon by saying, we are gathered here today to give thanks to engineers. And it was such a remarkable occasion, because you don't usually associate a place of holiness giving thanks to science and engineering. But this is really the world we're living in. There's no way we can disassociate ourselves from the technology anymore. Our moral values are intertwined with how we use technology. So there's a really great book that I'm reading at the moment called Technology and the Virtues, and it talks about how we need to create techno-moral society, that our morality and our ethics are now ingrained in how we use technology, whether it's media ethics, whether it's digital ethics, whether it's how we use robots, how we are creating, organisms from scratch in laboratories, bioengineering. And in the end, it's down to individual morality on how we use technology. So I really, really enjoy working with different teams where I can see people are using technology for the right reasons. People are solving problems that are worth solving for the greater good, and they're not feeling rewarded by subversive means or by nefarious nefarious targets. It's this whole black hat, white hat dichotomy that we're seeing, and really being on the side of the good technology and using technology for the greater good. And the more people that learn this skill of being able to command technology, which is coding and understanding science, when you command that skill, you also know the realm of what you can open yourself up for. It's just such a powerful language to learn. And if you don't have the right moral guiding, it's remarkable of the damage that can be caused. In fact, the other book I'm reading is called Ruined by Design. And it talks about, what happens. We're living in a society at the moment that has been ruined by design, because people have not put in place the right safeguards for using technology for the greater good. So yeah, I don't know if that quite answered your question, but by associating with engineers that want the greater good and to use technology for the greater good, that just helps to reinforce my values as well.
Yeah, your values, and you have a purpose there as well. That's your mission almost, and it links in nicely with the work that you're doing and the work that you would like to do. So that makes sense. I like that.
And I think as well to know that there's this great saying is, you can do anything you want, but you can't do everything. And by knowing there's so many problems to solve, choose the problem that you want to solve and throw yourself at it. And knowing that other people, you can trust society, that there are other people going to be looking at the other problems that you can't get around to. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons why I'm still so active in the engineering community outside work, because I really know which problems I'm solving at the moment. And I just like to reinforce myself to be like, it comforts me to know that there are really intelligent people out there that are tackling the problems that I can't get to.
Yes, and you like reading up on them as well, so at least you know what's going on and what progress has been made in those areas.
Yeah.
That's great. So tell me then, Kati, what is next for you?
That is a really, really good. So I see myself going more and more deeper into this idea of techno-moral values, and how we will be able to apply legal frameworks to technology applications. And I'm thinking, for example, one of the examples in this book called Ruined by Design, the engineer who was working on the software that enabled Volkswagen to bypass emission tests, engineer is in jail. All right. And so it's that accountability at the engineering level, at the coding level, at the designer level, to say, you enable something, your moral compass didn't prevent you from saving the greater good, or seeing who else would be at the detriment of what you've just coded. So there's going to be, in the next century, there are going to be some real big decisions that people will need to make, and the big problem will be on how to deal with climate change. Climate change will lead people to using alternative sources of fuel, food, means of transport, and then we will need to make sure that we've learned from the previous century of how we can potentially abuse technology, that we don't perpetuate a new disaster. If we master and survive and adapt climate change, we have to be sure we haven't enabled the next disaster, which is around uncontrollable AI, uncontrollable robotics, and just unleashing these tools without a moral framework. So I'm going to be focusing probably the next decade on balancing out how would we draw in these legal frameworks, how will we understand the impact technology can have. And there are great tools that are emerging on trying to predict impacts. And this is not just your standard risk assessment. This is really much more, how can we predict the future a bit better?
Wow, I love it. It sounds really exciting as well. And I wish you all the best of luck with that.
Thank you.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Kati, for coming on this podcast. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. I think it's been a bit more philosophical than what I thought. Yeah, if there are any of your followers who want to reach out and have a chat, they're more than welcome to get in touch.
I'll put your details in the show notes.
Super.
Cool.
Thanks very much, Chen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Fearless Females Voice podcast. Be sure to join our Facebook group called Fearless Females and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye for now.